Welcome to the Contrarian Capitalist. Welcome to NATO. NATO. Why NATO expansion is an incredibly bad idea. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization has been around for quite a while, but the issue that they've had over the years is that their continued expansion, I think with the inclusion the other day of Sweden and Finland, or the proposed inclusion of Sweden and Finland, potentially Ukraine, that may or may never happen, probably will never happen, means that they've expanded 9 times in the last 40, 50 years. And that's not good. Now, let's look at the geopolitics of this. I'm not going to take sides. I'm going to try and keep it as neutral as possible. Point of advice, what I'm going to say is it might sound like I'm defending Russia. I do not condone what they're doing over in Ukraine, but rather than build up into this media frenzy, we've got to try and look at both sides of the story. So obviously with Russia, Bolshevik Revolution back in the day, USSR, Soviet Union, that sort of stuff. And they are where they are now. Now, when the Soviet Union split, when the USSR split, etc., they were quite clear about border expansion back in the day. Putin has been quite clear about NATO's border expansion for the last 15, 20 years. Now, I'm not going to try and make myself sound like a guru on this subject, but I'm just trying to understand it myself. And I've watched some lectures. I've got on my note here, Professor Mearsheimer. Now, if you YouTube Professor Mearsheimer, there are a plethora of lectures that he's given over the years. And he actually predicted this back in 2014 in one of the older videos. He is the guru on this. He has predicted this time and time again. And it's almost like no one is listening. And it's scary. And it's nuts, basically. So why is NATO expansion a really bad idea? Well, the reason it's a really, really bad idea is it's going to it is very provocative towards Russia. And I wasn't around in the Cold War, but I understand it wasn't the easiest of times to be around a threat of nuclear going off at any point, that sort of stuff. Not ideal. We're almost kind of maybe a similar situation, are we not? Putin's been very clear back in the day, and I think when the Baltic states, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, I think they joined NATO late 90s, 1999 maybe. He said at the time, that's not a good idea. Or whenever they joined, that's not a good idea. We're finding that very provocative here in Russia. If you continue to expand into or closer to our borders, we're going to have issues. I'll let this one slide, but we're going to have issues. Of course, I'm paraphrasing, but that's kind of the gist of it. So they kind of got away with that, NATO. And then over the years, Turkey around and about. The biggest bone of contention, Ukraine. Now, Ukraine it's a lot of natural resources. I've been to the country. It's a lovely country. It's a wonderful country. It's a wonderful country, and that and Poland have sort of a very the issue they've got is they're wonderful countries, but in terms of geographical positioning, that they are like the 2 worst geographically positioned countries in the world. They have to be. Why? Because they're in the middle of ginormous powers in the west and powers in the east. If you want to know more about that, The Power of Geography by Tim Marshall, you can buy that, you can read it, you can listen to it on Audible, etc. That's a very good book. That will help you to understand that comment. So Ukraine's in the middle. It's had issues before, with the Germans and other years gone by, multiple famines. It's almost a breadbasket nowadays of the EU. Of Europe. The issue of NATO expansion is that what Professor Mearsheimer says, and it's something I agree with, is that NATO's really caused the issue that we're seeing at the moment between Russia, Ukraine, and now more and more countries and places getting involved. But the thing with NATO is it can't seem to get its own head out of its ass, which is a bit of an issue. And so there's a lot of things going on. Russia then decides to invade Ukraine. Now, how well that's going or how well that's not going, no, actually, to be fair, no one really knows, because you're going to get the propaganda in Russia, and then also over here, we're going to get all the Western propaganda as well. We've got, the US has pumped billions on paper into Ukraine. We've got here in the UK our Prime Minister coming out saying, well, if the UK economy collapses, it's it's a price worth paying for freedom in Ukraine. Is it really? Okay, fine. Let's have everyone here in the UK suffer as a result of what's going on over there. Not ideal. But no one can seem to get down to the table and have a chat. Yes, I know politics, geopolitics, it's a pain in the backside. I get that, and I know it's an intricate, web of lies, to be fair, and we fall for the propaganda, and we've got to stop doing that. NATO is probably the cause of this. Listen to the lectures by Professor Mearsheimer. NATO's probably the big issue here, and so Russia invades Ukraine. Okay, that's not ideal, doesn't look good, and civilian casualties never nice at all. But Russia, are relatively clear. Stop expanding NATO. Don't come close to our borders. Ukraine's not going to be part of NATO. Belarus definitely isn't part of NATO. The Baltic states went in, and now NATO decided it's an idea to put Sweden and Finland in. Well, if you look at a bit of geography of the world, if you look at the borders to the west of Russia, with the exception of Belarus and Ukraine, from the west down to part of the southwest, they're surrounded. They're surrounded by NATO, so they're going to feel that they're being pushed back into their zone, their territory, that they've got hardly any ways to expand west if they wanted to do so. So therefore, they have to look east. Now, I'm sure China and Russia will probably never have a situation where they have to, go to war. I don't know. It's very unlikely given both their ideologies. So the thing we're doing is, number one, NATO can't get his head out of his ass, which is bad. Number two, it's being provocative by then, insisting, accepting Sweden and Finland and again, potentially Ukraine. Who knows what's going to happen there? So that's going to piss off Russia even more. So I apologize, that profanity, I must remove on YouTube. So that's going to annoy Russia even more. So what do you think that's going to do? That's not going to help, is it? And all the while, from documentation, Putin's been very clear. Putin's been quite clear that NATO expansion is not acceptable to Russia. And what does NATO keep doing? NATO keeps expanding. Now, whether that's an ongoing power struggle between the US and Russia, I mean, it probably is. There's probably a lot of stuff that we don't know about, but it's time to dig in and ignore the propaganda and try and figure it out for ourselves and take a different opinion on it. Take a contrarian. That's the whole point of the channel, to take a contrarian view of these things. But really, NATO's creating a rod for its own back. The West is creating a rod for its own back. They're asleep at the wheel, and the people that are going to suffer, yes, the Ukrainians are definitely going to suffer, and a lot of people in the West are going to suffer as well. All these sanctions and SWIFT payment stuff and whatnot. Russia is an innovative place. They're going to lean more to the east, and if they start leaning more towards the east, which they're already doing, they're going to get into bed with China even more so than they're doing already. Potentially India as well, and that's a lot of the world population is over there. So it's dangerous from a NATO point of view. It's a stupid idea. It's a stupid move, and they're asleep at the wheel. No one's listening. And this is going to create further issues further on down the line. So not ideal, but that is why the expansion of NATO is a dumb idea, and it's unnecessarily provocative, in my opinion. On that note, all I can say is, if you like the video, press the like button below. Thank you for watching. Subscribe as well. I want to grow this channel as great as possible and provide that contrarian view, and hopefully that's enjoyable and gives you a different insight from the mass propaganda that we're all under the thumb of at the moment.